Marshall's seems like just another cheap fashion store, but behind its aisles lies a machinery of hidden prices and secret deals that very few customers know. While other chains close, this off-price retail giant expands its empire with a strategy that turns surpluses into irresistible discounts. How is it possible to find premium brands at half price and still generate profits? The answer reveals a Marshall's effect that changes competition, alters entire neighborhoods, and redefines what savings mean. Get ready to discover the keys to smart shopping that you will never see advertised. Part 1. Marshall's Hidden Machine, how it gets brands at fire sale prices. Imagine walking into a store where every shelf is a promise and every tag suggests a win. That place exists and it's called Marshall's. However, what matters isn't in plain sight but behind it, a silent gear that turns surpluses, canceled orders, and cosmetic errors into prices that seem impossible. On the other hand, not everything cheap means the same thing. There are signals, shortcuts, and traps. If you know them, your money goes further. If you ignore them, you choose blindly. Here we decode its machine, step by step, without noise and with real examples. Meanwhile, every decision pushes a hidden gear that rewards patience and punishes impulse. If you ever felt you overpaid for a brand, this is the moment to rebel. Support me with a like and subscribe so you don't let them fool you again, even. So there's a map to win, and it starts today, right now. Let's start with the idea that holds up the entire building. Marshall's doesn't buy like a traditional department store that plans complete collections 6 months out, but like a hunter that waits for the exact moment. When a brand overproduces, when a large order gets canceled at the last minute, or when a line changes its packaging, the TJX machine activates and negotiates lots at clearance prices. That's how discounts from 20 to 60% are born, without magic, just timing and discipline. However, that savings doesn't appear in your cart by chance. It happens because the off-price model works with high turnover and short windows. Where others promise perfect assortments, Marshall's accepts incomplete assortments, scattered sizes, and seasons that have already turned the calendar. Even so, the consumer wins. When they understand that what matters isn't the latest color but the intrinsic value of the product and the price at which it comes into play. On the other hand, the sources that feed this machine are varied and very specific. Factory surpluses that would fill warehouses, collections halted by shifting trends, end-of-season leftovers that leave orphaned garments, and lots with minimal cosmetic defects. Sometimes a different piece of hardware, a zipper with another tone, or a dented box is enough for the price to plummet. What's functional stays, what's superfluous gets discounted. Now then, there's a nuance few explain clearly. Not everything you see comes from the brand's main line. Many labels produce specific versions for the off-price channel with materials, linings, or stitching adjusted to hit a target price. The same factory can assemble both worlds, but not with the same specification. Those who know how to read the signals detect real differences and decide consciously, not by the illusion of the logo. Even so, distinguishing a mainline piece from one made for off-price isn't a secret art. The inner label usually gives it away with unusual season codes, the linings reveal lighter weights, the hardware shows less polished finishes, and the interior seams tell the truth where the displays stay silent. If the accessory also lacks replacements, dust bags, or certificates, the brand usually includes in retail, you're looking at a price built for channel. As a result, the key question isn't whether it's authentic, but whether the value justifies the ticket. A corrected leather can last years. If it's well assembled, a sole with fewer layers can perform. If the last is right, and a lower thread count sheet can be fresher and more durable depending on the weave. Quality isn't binary, it's a scale, and off-price plays on it by pushing costs down with concessions visible to the attentive eye. What many didn't see coming is that the final price tells a complete story. The Marshall's tag usually shows 3 levels of information. First, the comparative price that acts as a psychological anchor and reminds you how much you'd pay in a brand store. Then, the Marshall's price, which breaks that anchor and creates a sense of discovery. And finally, the markdown signals that appear when the inventory clock starts running. Whoever understands that trilogy reads the game with an edge. However, markdowns aren't a uniform trick. Depending on the region, foot traffic, and calendar, the reductions move in steps that chase liquidity without chaos. Tags change color or add stickers that rewrite the price. every certain number of days, and the item that seemed expensive yesterday can drop by half if it survived the first weekend. Time is literal money. In off price, and the clock doesn't forgive the indecisive. On the other hand, there's an invisible curation that directs everything you see and decides in days what comes in and what goes out. Each store receives winning categories according to its zip code, climate, and purchasing power, and if a batch moves fast, the pattern repeats. If something cools down, the flow is cut. Thus, the aisle feels like a treasure that changes place, and the hunt becomes a habit. Nothing is random, everything responds to live data. Even so, there are risks worth facing with eyes open. The assortment is inconsistent, sizes don't always appear complete, and some manufacturer warranties don't apply when the purchase wasn't made in the brand's own channel. In addition, certain cosmetics and fragrances arrive from discontinued lots that deserve verifying the batch date and period after opening once at home. The savings exist, but they demand method and a stricter eye than average. As a consequence, the best defense is learning to recognize quality with your fingers and with light, and to use the packaging to your advantage. A well-stitched bag keeps irregular stitches inside, a balanced jacket rests without tightness on the shoulders, and a reliable knife reveals consistent steel along the spine. At the same time, a dented box that doesn't affect performance opens the door to asking for an adjustment at the register. Concrete argument, concrete discount. However, the business architecture doesn't only depend on external opportunities. There are also agreements with brands to manufacture lines with target costs that let the consumer feel like a winner without breaking margins. This isn't a trick. If you understand it, it's transparency applied to another segment. Your job is to decide when that equation serves you and when it's better to wait for a higher spec piece. On the other hand, the TJX model keeps its costs low with medium-sized stores, lean staffing, and logistics processes that unbox and display quickly. That behind-the-curtain efficiency supports the price. You see just as much as the supplier discount does. If the store turns, the price drops. If the store clogs, the price rises. The stage is clear and the script rewards rotation, but the most useful thing is understanding that this is a system that rewards knowledge and time. Those who recognize signals, return at the right moment, and compare two nearby stores, leave with better purchases than those dragged by impulse. It's not about luck, it's about method. And the method begins by knowing how each item reaches the shelf and why its price changed 3 times in 2 weeks. As a preview, this entire mechanism translates into concrete tactics for the day of your visit. There are hours and days with an edge, categories where the return is greater, and a silent language on the tags that tells you when to act. In the next part, we turn theory into practice and draw the route that separates a novice from a hunter with judgment and a protected wallet. Part 2, when to go and what to buy. Field tactics that separate novices from hunters. As we anticipated in Part 1, timing decides more than the logo, and patience is worth more than impulse. That's why the first move is choosing the exact day. Restocking peaks. Usually concentrate on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, when carts arrive with fresh lots and untouched tags. Whoever enters, early finds sizes, colors, and first markdowns before the aisle turns into a puzzle. The clock rules from the door. Clock against you. However, the day isn't enough if you miss the hour. Between 9 and 11, the store breathes order, the lighting reveals finishes, and staff aren't overwhelmed yet. In that window, you see seams, hardware, and weights with a cool eye, and if the piece deserves it, you can request a stockroom check without a line staring at you. In the afternoon, the energy changes, the assortment scatters, and the visual noise increases. The early find weighs more than 1,000 coupons, hidden treasure. On the other hand, weekends seem designed to confuse anyone who arrives without a plan. Saturday multiplies traffic, reduces critical sizes, and lengthens lines that invite impulse buys while you wait. Sunday mixes returns and fragmented restocks that cloud judgment. Even so, rainy and cold days act as a natural filter, fewer shoppers, more silence, better reading of the shelf. The weather also lowers mental prices. Window of opportunity. What many didn't see coming is that seasons dictate discounts and brand behavior. January unloads, the weight of the holidays and releases collections. Brands don't want to store. July and August mark the catalog turn with clearances that make room for back to school. The weeks before the holidays bring quiet surpluses that slip out without noise, and after the new year, the deep cut appears. The calendar writes your map, clock against you. As a result, the smart route isn't a single store but a sequence. The so-called Marshall's Run consists of visiting 2 or 3 nearby branches in an hour and a half, linking neighborhoods with different demographics. The magic is that inventory varies by zip code, climate, and demand level, so a rare size in the first store may appear multipled in the second. Change neighborhoods, change the loot. Hidden treasure. However, not every category pays your effort equally. In apparel and footwear, the return improves when you control 3 basic details. First, soles with firm stitching and clean gluing without excess plastic shine. Second, lasts that don't collapse when you press the heel and don't twist with minimal torsion. Third, series or codes that correspond to known mainline collections and not opaque lines. The shoe reveals its truth underneath. Price anchor broken. On the other hand, bags and accessories demand a more technical, less romantic eye. Well-worked leather breathes, smells natural, and shows irregular pores, while synthetics feel glassy and repeat texture. Hardware tells the story, with the right weight and without burrs. Linings show even stitching, and zippers glide without jumps. If a protective dust bag or a card. The brand always includes is missing, adjust expectations. Real value over logo. Even so, the home and kitchen section is where many multiply value without so much risk. A solid frying pan has a thick base and stable walls that distribute heat evenly. A reliable knife betrays consistent steel in spine and blade, and a cutting board doesn't warp after the first wash. In textiles, towels reveal GSM by simple touch, and sheets show weave strength beyond thread count. Raw materials don't lie, hidden treasure. As a result, in-aisle checking needs a mini routine that doesn't steal time. Press interior seams, look for symmetry. In finishes, fold, turn, and look with side light that reveals imperfections. If you find a small cosmetic defect that doesn't affect function, keep the piece and the evidence, because at the register that detail is a valid argument for an adjustment. Inspection saves real money. Price anchor broken. What many overlook lies in beauty and fragrance, where temptation is strong and risk too. Discontinued lots can be gems if the batch has been well preserved and the seal remains closed. Verify the manufacturing code with common sense. Check color, phase separation, and smell, and avoid banged up packaging that may have compromised the formula. In fragrances, an intact box and uniform cellophane are security signals. Judgment before hurry. However, the biggest edge comes when you know when to close the purchase without looking back. Unequivocal signals are the last size in a sought-after series, a neutral color that matches everything, a premium material with an anchor price far below market, and a markdown that crosses your mental value threshold. If the price anchor shows a realistic comparative and the item passes basic tests, delaying the decision costs more than paying. No room for doubt. On the other hand, negotiation exists and doesn't require shouting or speeches. If a box is dented, if the hardware shows micro scratches, if an accessory missing doesn't affect function, make a concrete and respectful request for a 10 to 20% adjustment. Show the defect, explain you'll take the item as is, and accept a no without drama. The key is the specific argument at the precise moment. Discount earned with judgment, even. So the 30-day return policy lets you make a defensive move that separates impulse from investment. Buy with the tag on, keep the receipt, test at home with calm and different light, walk the shoes on clean surfaces, hang the garment to evaluate real drape, and open cosmetics hygienically. If something doesn't hold up, return it without delay and free up budget for the next find. Home is your second test room, controlled risk. As a result, your routine should become a repeatable method that improves with every visit. Note, prices, dates, and stores. In your phone, record sizes that disappear. Quickly, photograph tags with codes you'll identify later and save references to lines that worked for you. Repetition reveals arrival and markdown patterns and turns a casual stroll into a measurable process. What gets measured improves. Systematic hidden treasure. What many didn't see coming is that patience also has its price. Sometimes it pays to wait for a second markdown when you detect abundant stock and slow turn, and other times you must act on the first pass because the key size won't reappear. To decide, observe the pace of sell-through in that store for 2 or 3 weeks and cross-check with the seasonal calendar. Time, again, works for those who understand it. Clock against you. However, not everything can be optimized without limit. There will be days when the aisle yields nothing memorable and the best move is leaving empty-handed with your budget intact. That discipline avoids purchases that occupy closet space and kill margin for the next opportunity. A professional hunter knows the forest silence is also part of the strategy. Saying no is winning time. Price anchor protected. On the other hand, the close of this part calls for a bridge toward what sustains invisible purchases. The ergonomics of the route, the psychology of visual anchors, and the small devices that raise the ticket without you noticing. Just as we learned with Aldi to read labels and schedules, here we'll understand the sales floor script and the friendly trap of the checkout line. The route continues through the map of impulse. Ready for the internal map. Part 3. The route that makes you buy. Layout, impulse, and tricks at the checkout line. Now that you master the when and the what, you need to understand how they guide you without you noticing. The Marshall's sales floor is set up like a treasure hunt with reward stations and small shortcuts that raise the ticket. Nothing is random, everything has a measurable purpose and an expected output. The result is simple. You walk more, look more, touch more, and decide higher. Follow the trail. However, the floor plan isn't innocent or static. It reconfigures seasonally with a promise at the entrance, a magnet in the back, and a current of end caps that pushes you toward the margins. The feeling of discovery triggers the endorphins of finding and creates gentle urgency. If something looks newly placed, your brain assumes there's more to discover and speeds up your pace. FOMO activated. On the other hand, the entrance works as a seasonal statement. That's where they place what tells the story of the moment, from dominant colors to textures of the coming weather. It's not the cheapest zone, but it does set the tone of the hunt and defines your mental price anchor. If the first thing you see would compare at 60, paying 30 for something similar. Deeper inside will feel like a steal. Price anchor lit. Meanwhile, the back wall acts like a beacon that forces you to cross the store. It usually houses attraction categories like footwear, home, or bags with recognizable brands that justify the trip. Getting there ensures you pass multiple temptation points and that your hands carry at least one option. It's distance designed to spark curiosity and reward patience. Hidden treasure in the back, even so. The true accelerator is the end cap. There, aspirational pieces sit beside hook, items priced far below the comparative. That mix creates contrast and teaches you to spot an instant win if a $120 jacket appears next to another. At $39 with a red tag, your perception of value tilts toward the second without asking permission. Price anchor manipulated, tired of your money, disappearing on purchases that aren't worth what they promise? Join, subscribe, and make sure you're on the side of those who buy smart. As a consequence of this route, you reach the line with your brain full of anchors and your cart half decided. There, the friendly trap appears. Imported snacks, kitchen gadgets, technical socks, mini cosmetics, and travel accessories. These are low-pain items that add between 5 and 15% to the average ticket in minutes of waiting. If the line moves slowly, impulse gains ground. Ticket up. What many didn't see. Coming is that the most profitable linear meter of the store can be the line itself. The density of small product per linear foot, the high turnover, and typical margin turn that corridor into a conversion machine. Just as we learned with fast food chains that optimize the pickup counter, here the queue is a second counter that never rests. Inverted window of opportunity. But the most surprising thing is the visual language that speaks without words. Tags with MSRP crossed out, fuzzy comparatives, and last units signs build a climate of imminent decision. If you saw that same code yesterday at a higher price, and today it carries a new sticker, your mind records progress and fears going backward. The psychological clock starts and tells you the next step is to pay now. Clock against you, however, self-checkout isn't always synonymous with real savings. In quiet hours, it gives you control and speed, but in peak hours, it can hide. Involuntary overcharges like accessories that scan without review or duplicates no one detects. Choosing a staffed checkout when you carry delicate products or manual discounts protects you from errors and lets you negotiate. Control before hurry. On the other hand, speed shouldn't beat judgment. Scan slowly, check the screen, confirm the comparative wasn't used to inflate the anchor, and verify the discount applied where it should. Every 20 seconds of attention can save you a percentage that, added over the year, pays for several visits. Between rushing and checking, choose checking. Verify without hurry. Meanwhile, security explains display cases, sensors, and tethers. It's not hostility, it's margin protection for small, valuable pieces. If you want to evaluate a watch, a premium bag, or a high-end perfume, ask for assistance and examine with light and touch what tells the truth. The in-hand test reveals what the case hides. Demand a test now. Even so, staff can be your ally if you ask the right question. Ask to locate a size, check the stockroom, or hold a piece briefly while you verify another category. At peak traffic, staffing is lean, so be specific, polite, and quick. When the request makes sense, help arrives. Ask for concrete support. As a result, your checkout process follows 3 steps that fortify your purchase. First, show any stable cosmetic defect to request a reasonable adjustment. Second, confirm the code matches the physical tag. Third, ask to split into 2 transactions. If you're torn between a likely return and a sure purchase, playing with order gives you wiggle room. Secure the order. What many forget is returns as a strategic tool. If the store recognizes the product without a receipt and the date is recent, you'll resolve quickly, but it's better to keep your receipt and avoid store credit if you don't expect to return sooner. Fragrance, beauty, and electronics usually have stricter limits, so decide at the speed of the calendar. Clear policy, clean wallet, but the most useful thing is closing with a mental route you can repeat. Enter on the left to avoid the initial bottleneck, cross straight to the back wall, inspect end caps, pick 2 main categories, and limit your visit to the impulse lane to a single item. If nothing exceeds your value threshold, leave with your budget intact. Method before chance. From here we jump to the aerial view of the business, where we'll understand why Marshall's grows when others close, how it leverages cheap real estate, and why its arrival pressures prices across the neighborhood. And if the aisle is the microcosm of the trick, expansion is the full board where the game is decided. Prepare the big map. Part 4. The big play. Expansion, cheap real estate, and the Marshall's effect in your city. We've reached the wide map where you understand why Marshall's advances while others retreat. When a liquidation sign turns off a department store, TJX appears with a cold calculator and a fast calendar. The promise isn't glamour, it's efficiency that becomes price, that becomes habit. The board moves quietly and all at once. Big board, direct move. However, the key isn't just buying cheap, but where and how. Former Sears, JCPenney, or Kmart boxes. Offer square footage at costs, an agile operator can turn into an advantage. Favorable leases, minimal build-out, and fast openings form an equation that reduces rent per unit sold. Cheap real estate, immediate margin. On the other hand, the medium format balances display and expense. Neither an expensive mastodon nor a restricted boutique. Less HVAC, less staff, less idle inventory, more turn that feeds the wheel. The result reaches the ticket. With discounts without coupons and assortments that change before they become wallpaper. Low cost, high turn. Even so, speed isn't chaos, it's replication. Proven layouts, national suppliers, logistics that cross states and hours, and an internal culture that measures what you don't see. Every day one between the dock and the hangar is money that doesn't evaporate and a markdown you do notice. Time is margin. As a result, consumption tides push in their favor. In cycles of inflation or uncertainty, the price-sensitive customer accepts past seasons if the value is tangible. Since 2008, every economic jolt reinforced the habit of hunting off-price without guilt. The environment does half the work. Cycle in their favor. What many didn't see coming is the Marshall's effect on the neighborhood. When the store opens, nearby outlets and chains adjust comparatives, promote basics, and slim margins within weeks. You don't just shop in one store, you shop in a market that reorders itself under silent pressure. Prices down around it. However, presence doesn't only push prices down, it also lifts traffic. A live anchor drags footsteps that end up in cafes, shoe stores, and services. A dead mall breathes if there's an operator that turns, and that breath pays rents that used to seem impossible possible. Traffic that spills over. On the other hand, competitors react with familiar playbooks. Clearance corners appear, outlet lines with new tags, and weekend coupon books. Even so, replicating the symptoms doesn't replicate the system. Without opportunistic buying and fast logistics, the imitation stays as makeup. Form without substance. Even so, the motives that guided us return with meaning. The hidden treasure exists, but the price anchor can deceive, and the clock ticks for everyone. Those who cross the door with method take real value and avoid tempting displays. Attention is the new currency, method or impulse. As a natural consequence, closing this arc means understanding that expansion isn't a slogan. It's the measurable symptom of a system that turned others' excess into its own opportunity. If you know the map, read the signals, and respect your threshold, the neighborhood pays you for learning. Knowledge that turns into money. Every wasted dollar is time in your life that won't return. Don't let it happen again. Subscribe and join me in this search for real value. Now that you've seen the machine and the map, you'll understand why some leave Marshalls with real bargains, while others come back with bags they don't use. The difference isn't luck, it's method. Just as with Aldi, you learn to read labels. And timing. Here you've deciphered how expansion, cheap leases, and the local effect shape your final price. And just like that, former fast food employee warned about the hidden kitchen. Today you know retail also has its back room. If this journey gave you value and helped you buy better, give it a like and subscribe.